Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'll be painting something a little bit different and it's going to be on canvas. So I had this vision of kind of like two pigeons on the opposite side, and like the background is going to be reflected water, and then I'm just going to distort the bottom of like a puddle below the pigeons. I'm actually quite excited to paint this because I actually love painting pigeons and I think they're actually very cute. A little bit aggressive in New York, and originally I wanted to call this Gangs of New York because they can be a little bit gangsterish but also sometimes overly friendly. But in the end I've decided to change it a little bit because I had to add a splash of red, which you'll see later, so I had to change the title completely. So when I started this, I've already sketched out the background, which are just tiles on the walls and a couple of windows and the two pigeons. Right now I'm just doing the first layer. I just want to get a feel of how it's gonna look like. So this is just a very thin layer to map out the whole thing, and then I'm going to repaint the second layer. I start by lightly painting the pigeons first because I think they'll be the hardest to paint, and the rest are very monotonous. It's just very repetitive, and I choose like a brownish and grayish kind of shade for the windows, and then the tiles are going to be in a light like gray washed, brown washed color. Right now I'm dipping my brush into water, so it's this very light shade of gray and brown, and I just want to fill up the space first, and then I'm going to use a little darker shade of gray to create shadows on both the left and right side of the painting. I feel it in my bones that this part of the painting was the most tedious. I had to paint the tiles individually, one by one, and so that it doesn't look so uniform. Like some has a little bit more gray, some has a little bit more brown, and some are lighter and some are darker. So it has a kind of like a more different kind of consistency across the board. And in between each tiles, you have to draw with like a thin black line to separate the tiles. So when it came to this part here, where I'm just blacking out the tiles, it's supposed to be like the reflection of the shadows, I was very grateful. So for this part, I just mix Van Dyck brown with black and a little bit of gray so that it doesn't look too black, but it's kind of like dark enough. So the remainder of the tiles between the painted ones and the shadow, I just have to paint it and connect it so it becomes whole. So at the edge of the shadow, I take a size 000 brush, I dip it in white, and I outline the edges. So this part with the tiles and the shadow, it's very repetitive, especially the tiles. So I just kind of skip it a little bit. Otherwise, you'll be bored going through 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of just the same thing with the tiles. So this part where we're painting the windows are pretty straightforward. I just paint across what I painted earlier. But over here where the shadow kind of falls upon, I darken the windows, so I paint it in dark gray, and for the little beams in between that are white, I paint them in gray. This was where a little bit of adjustments were made, because you can see that the windows were originally painted brown, but then it wouldn't have made sense because there's a shadow cast upon it, so I decided to paint it darker. And for the windows that are completely in the shadow, I just paint the beams in white and the windows in dark gray. So here's a close-up shot of the windows that's split in between the shadows. So the one that is not under the cast of the shadow, I paint them in brown, and then I kind of draw the line to connect the shadows, and on this side I paint them in dark gray. Next, I move on to the remaining windows. These are going to remain the color as I painted them. It's going to be dark brown, medium brown to light brown, and I'm going to mirror it with the windows on the other canvas. So this part is pretty straightforward. The windows are plain, you just have to follow the colors and repeat it for all the other windows. So just remember that this whole canvas is mirrored, So for the windows as well, we go from dark to light on the left side and from light to dark on the right side. So finally, we are on to the final subject, which are the pigeons. And this part is pretty much done already. Like the first layer, I've got my color mapped out. I know the patterns and how I want to paint it. So I'm just painting over it again, but with more finer details this time and to blend out the feathers properly. Also on the head of the pigeon, I'm also using a size 000 brush, and I use just a little bit of Viridian green to give it that nice green shine on its feathers. Here's a close-up shot onto how I kind of try to achieve that feathery texture on the pigeon. I use a fine brush, size 000, and I make this very tiny up and down strokes, and whenever there's a color difference, for example dark gray to light gray, I take the paintbrush and I do those little tiny strokes in between to kind of just blend it out so that the transition looks a little bit smoother, and when you zoom in it'll be able to resemble very tiny fine lines or soft feathers. I found it a little bit tricky to draw the markings on the wings of the pigeon to give it a natural look, but overall I think I'm quite satisfied with how it looks like. And then now I'm just adding a little bit more green on its head with Viridian green and just a dash of pale purple. So now we're going to paint the second pigeon, and because no two pigeons are truly alike, I've decided to give this a different marking. Also, I forgot to add that I add a little bit of highlights on the wings of the pigeon using ivory white and titanium white. So I do those tiny little strokes to give it a little bit more variety so that the wings, or rather the feathers, don't look as flat. And for this one, I've decided to give it a little bit of speckled grey spots. At the bottom of the wing, I just give it a little design there so that it kind of flows a little bit nicer. And then the tail is painted in dark grey, shaded to a darker shade of grey mixed with black. After a whole grueling week of painting this 2 hours a day, I'm finally down to the last stage. So right now I want to distort the image a little bit because this is supposed to be the reflection of water, so I need to create like a puddle underneath the pigeons to give that impression. Otherwise the aesthetics look a bit weird, like are they diagonally on windows or not? So after I draw the shape of it with the chalk, I used black and also ivory white mixed with brown, basically the colors of the background, and I used a brush and kind of swirl it around them to create the image of a puddle. Once it is done, I use a wet wipe and I remove the chalk marks around it. So this was the last minute plan. I felt that it was missing something, just a pop of red. But I had to tell myself I'm not going to paint another red rose. So I've decided to just draw a red string connecting the two pigeons. And although the result looks a little bit weird, but I think it could be meaningful as well, depending on how you interpret it. Anyway, I am so glad that this painting is done. I hope you like it as much as I kind of enjoyed painting it. It's something different. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Goodbye.